So today we're going to be covering section 1-6. We're going to concentrate on not only 4C, but also 4D. The first problem that we're going to work on is going to be asked to identify the domain and range of a function. Now remember from last year, you might have covered this. The domain is the same thing as your input. So whenever they say domain, they're asking you for your input. And then what you do on these problems is you just go ahead and list the numbers that are in the input. So you'll be listing 0, 2, 4, and 6. The range, if it's not the input, of course, it's going to be the output. And in this particular problem, it will be 24, 27, 30, and 33. So in these problems, when you see them in your assignment for tonight, all you need to do is to list the numbers that are in the input or in the output. The next problem that we're going to do is we're going to tell whether the pairing is a function. Now I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put in these arrows. They weren't in there. But I'm going to tell you right now that this relationship is a function. And you can go, well, Mrs. Medvick, why is that? I'll tell you that in just a few minutes. Let's go to the second one. This second one, this is not a function. And the reason why it is not, and you'll notice that it's a little off center here, so we'll fix that. The reason why it is not is for something to be a function, the input or the domain cannot repeat. We don't really care about the output. We just care about the input. So the input, you'll notice, the 2's repeat. And so it's not a function. And we're going to explain and say the input repeats. Now you can ask me, Mrs. Medvick, why, what's the difference between a function and not a function? Well, a function is just a special type of relationship. It's a special type of equation. And so this particular table is a function, is not a function because the 2's repeat in the input. All right. Now that we know that, if we take a look at the first example, is the first example a function? Of course it is. It is because you'll notice that none of the numbers in the input repeat. So yes, no numbers in the input repeat. So the numbers in the input repeat. It's not a function. It is a function. Right? If I take a look at the last example, again, I'm going to just line this up a little bit here, a little bit better. Okay. You can say, well, Mrs. Medvick, let's take a look at this. Is this a function, yes or no? It is not a function, or it should say it is a function, and the reason why it is, you'll take a look at the input. The input, the numbers are 0, 4, 12, and 20. None of those numbers repeat. So is it a function? Yes. Numbers in the input don't repeat. Now you'll notice that the numbers in the output do repeat. That's okay. All right, that's okay. All I'm taking a look at is the input. The input, the numbers cannot repeat for this to be a function. Again, it's a special type of relationship. And we'll talk more about that as we go, because there is more to it than that. But right now, for our purposes, we're just going to be looking at the tables, right? Let's take a look at this next one. Notice it says make a function for, or I'm sorry, make a table for the function. You'll notice they give me the domain, which of course is my input, and those numbers are 0, 1, 2, and 3. They're asking us to make a table. Now, when you make a table for me, this is how I want you to do the table. All right. And so in the first column, I'm going to put an X. In the middle column, it's Y equals 3X. And in the final column, I'm going to put the Y. Anytime you make a table, anytime you graph for me, I'm going to ask you to do this type of table. It's called an H table, right? So I'm going to plug in some values. So I'm going to put in 0 for X. Y equals 3 times 0. Y equals 0. And then I'm going to draw a line across. It just helps you organize. So I'm going to ask you to please do that when you do your assignment. We're going to plug in a 1. Y equals 3 times 1. 3 times 1 is 3. right? Draw my line, plug in my 2, and I'm getting these numbers because they gave them up to me up in the beginning of the problem. So y equals 3 times 2, y gives me 6. And finally, I'm going to plug in a 3. Y equals 3 times 3, and y gives me 9. So my answer is 9. Now, I did not totally finish my problem because you'll notice it says to identify the range of the function. Now, if the domain is my x, all right, then the range is my y. And so what you're going to do is you're going to say range equals, and I want you to actually list the numbers in the range in that order. Okay? Make sure you make a list. Don't just circle it and say, here it is. Okay? Make sure that you make a list. All right, let's go on to the next problem. They give me the domain. They give me the function. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. X and y equals 2x plus 4 and y. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in those numbers. I'm going to start with 0. Y equals 2 times 0 plus 4. Y equals, now this is really important. A lot of students want to skip these steps. I want you to show every step. I want you to show all your work. That's why I'm modeling what I want you to do here. So I end up with 0 plus 4, because 2 times 0 is 0, and y equals 4. And I put a 4 over in the y column. Right? Draw my line, put in a 2. Y equals 2 times 2 plus 4. Y equals 4 plus 4. So y equals 8. Okay. My next number is 3. Y equals 2 times 3 plus 4. Y equals 6 plus 4. Y equals 10. Okay, and I'm going to keep going. Notice that my domain, it actually skipped. So that's why I'm skipping. You'll notice my domain up here. I'm going to skip to 6. Y equals 2 times 6 plus 4. Y equals 12 plus 4. Y equals 16. And finally, I'm going to plug in my 7s. 7, y equals 2 times 7 plus 4. Y equals 14 plus 4. Y equals 18. And then it asks me to identify the range. So I'm going to go my range equals 4, 8, 10, 16, and 18. And the reason why I'm doing this is I'm modeling. This is how I would like you to do your assignment. All right. So when you come to the problem like this in your homework, make sure that you do it this way. All right. Let's going to go on. We're going to write a rule for the function. Now, when we write a rule for the function, it's the same thing as saying an equation. So I'm going to come up with an equation. When I do input, I like to use x. When I do output, I like to use y. You don't have to, but most of the time, this is what happens. When we look at this, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what do you do to the input to get to the output? What do we do to the input to get the output? And it has to work for all the numbers. If it doesn't work for all the numbers, then it's not a rule. So for the example, what I look at is what do I do to the 0 to get the 2, the 1 to get the 3, the 2 to get the 6, the 6 to get the 8, the 10 to get the 2. Well, I'm adding 2 each time. 0 plus 2, or sorry, 0 plus, yes, plus 2 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 4 plus 2 equals 6, 6 plus 2 equals 8, 10 plus 2 equals 12. And so since that's my rule, I'm going to go ahead and write my equation. So y equals then x plus 2. And that ends up being my rule or my equation. All right. Let's look at the next one. You're going to notice with the next one, what do I do to the 1 to get 1.5, 2 to get the 3, 3 to get the 4.5, and 4 to get the 6. Well, if you look at it closely, you're going to notice that I'm going to multiply it by 1.5. Now, you notice that if I take a look at the input, all right, to the output, my numbers get bigger. So if I know my numbers are going to get bigger, I'm not going to be subtracting. Okay, most of the time, you're not going to divide. So we're going to multiply by 1.5. So y ends up giving me 1.5x. Right? Notice that I didn't use a multiplication symbol there. You don't need to. We want it in simplest form. So we're not going to use parentheses. We're not going to use a dot. We're not going to use, an X, of course, or star. You don't need it. So it's just 1.5x, and that is my rule or my equation. Okay. Let's go on. This last slide just kind of puts the main idea of the section together. If I say domain, it's the same thing as the input, same thing as the independent variable, same as my x value. When I say range, it's the same thing as my output, it's the same thing as my dependent variable, and it's the same thing as my y value. And those are vocabulary words you need to know to be successful, all right? You're going to see it anywhere. You're going to see it not only in algebra, but geometry, algebra 2, ACT, plan test, explore test. You're going to be seeing these words. So if you want to be successful in those areas, you want to make sure that you understand that the domain and the range are not the same thing. They're separate things, right? Okay, that's it for today. Main idea, what are certain tables functions and others are not a function. The main idea is that domains and the inputs cannot repeat, right? This last activity, why is this? You can go ahead and you can click on that. That'll take you to a screen from our textbook, classzone.com. We'll also be looking at that at a later date. So we'll be working at that on Monday. Your assignment will be in Schoology. If you have any questions, make sure you come and see Mrs. Medvick as soon as possible.